Hello there and welcome to another live chapter reading for Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Today I shall be reading from Goddess of Everything by Paul Deblassie III. The imagination is both root and bough, living between earth and sky, in the earth and in the wind. Gaston Bachelard, Earth and Reveries of Repose. Prologue. Howling night winds beneath the pale full moon whipped up dust devils that danced between gravestones in the 400-year-old cemetery of Infierno, an arid and desolate realm of haunted nights and lost souls. Infierno lay in the desert region of Aztlán del Norte, bordering on the Rio Grande River, a place where generations of mixed blood, mestizos, of native Mexican and distant European bloodlines, lived. Vicious winds curled brown and grey dust into weird forms. They looked like taunting ghosts, their bony fingers stretching out as claws prickling the skin of the still living souls. Grit and sharp pieces of sandstone twisted through the night like poison-tipped cactus needles set on a path of targeted violence. 5-year-old Gabriel de la Tierra, a slight and sickly boy, clutched his mother's hand. He did not like the cemetery. His mother made him come with her when she brought flowers to the graves of old friends. She had so many friends who had died, here one day and the next swept away by the dark powers of death. Gabriel's father was dead. His father had loved him, and he had loved his father. His heart stopped when his father died. Gabriel did not want to live without his father. He looked into the open grave, the coffin on the dusty ground beside it, and a shudder coursed up his spine. His teeth chattered and his head quivered with a quick chill. He tried to step back from the edge of the grave. It was deep and dark. He couldn't see the bottom. His mother yanked him back to the grave's edge, held him in place with her steel grip on his shoulder, his chin jerked downwards. He was forced to peer into the black. Grains of sand crumbled along the edges of the grave, and Gabriel feared falling into the open pit. He did not move. His mother pulled him back from the edge into her cold and hard body. 6 women dressed in black like his mother let out cries and howls. Mantillas, delicately crafted lace, were draped over their heads and foreheads. The stubbly black wool that covered their bodies was like the closely cropped fur of a coyote. They were his mother's friends. The winds grew worse and the priest's black cape flapped furiously. It looked like the outspread wings of a bat. Above the wind's roar, the priest shouted Latin prayers for the dead. The old language scared Gabriel, for it seemed like the echoes of a million voices of dead people chanting. Hairs on the back of Gabriel's neck stood on end. A flush of fear tingled up his spine. His mother told her friends that since birth, Gabriel sensed things, presences. Others couldn't see them. Mother saw them, and she raised her index finger with its sharpened red nail to her lips and shushed the little boy when he spoke of them, as he lay covered in blankets in his bed at home on cold autumn nights. The old Latin language echoed through the mesa. It brought a terrible feeling. Grey clouds turned black. The priest shouted loud like a whipping wind, his face redder than autumn chilies. Hanging from the twine, ristras, their long strands like blood on a tightly wound rope, dripping slowly to the ground. Black cape stretching outwards, the old priest stood tall as a pine tree and scary as the swirling storm clouds. Cottonwood trees bent twisted branches downwards, like skeleton fingers. They almost touched Gabriel's head. He jerked back, afraid of the gnarly limbs. They could hurt like his mother's fingers did when she clung and dug into his back and along his neck. Desperate, eyes wide with horror, he wanted to move away from the spindly fingers of the tree. He knew they came alive on scary and stormy days. Everything in him wanted to run, but his mother's hand squeezed his neck and forced him back into place. The eerie night time and harsh cold made him close his eyes. He wanted to drift away in his mind. He tried to pretend he was home in bed, warm and safe. He tried to pretend that his father hadn't died. Tears welled. He held them back. They clogged up on the inside. His ribs hurt from the pressure. Pinpricks tingled through his stomach and across the lining of his lungs and the insides of his throat. No tears came. They wouldn't come. They feared his mother. Gabriel couldn't cry. He needed to be alone to cry. He needed to be at home, quiet in his bedroom, wrapped under the warm covers of his bed. The air quivered, wrinkled with waves moving up and down, twirling inside then out. Dull light shimmered and took form. His father, with his big chest and warm arms, appeared. Gabriel stayed still. No one else could see his father. This was a strange time. Gabriel knew his father loved him, seeing him like the morning sun melting frost from pine tips. Juana, Gabriel's mother, squeezed his hand. His knuckles cracked. He did not cry. He became like steel. Eyes glinting red, she turned and looked at Gabriel. All thoughts of his father fled from his mind. Mother was scarier than the mighty wind and whirling dust and howling women and chanting priest. She made him push thoughts of his father far away. He was never to think of his father. Only Mother's thoughts were to stay in his mind. I love you, mijo. You are mine, my son. She placed her thoughts into his mind as delicately as a silk thread through the tiniest of needles. She put her thoughts into his mind. She wrapped Gabriel into her black woolen dress with its coarse fabric that scratched his face, its tangled layers and woolen folds making gasp for breath. 3 days earlier, the doctor said his father, Ernesto, had lost the will to live. Gabriel watched colour and life fade from his father's face, bronze to white and pale, then ashen. His father withered away. Gabriel wanted to remember his strong and kind father. In a secret place in his mind, he would remember his strong and good father, and no one would take the memory. Mother squeezed his hand again, harder. Bony hands and red eyes made the memory fade. Gabriel's mind went blank. He made it blank. His mind was a white space, cold as a snowstorm in Aztlán del Norte. Te quiero mucho, mijo. Te quiero mucho. Mother smiled and nodded. I love you, my son. I love you. Again and again she forced her thoughts into his mind. Her thought messages made Gabriel tighten up so hard his muscles hurt. His neck felt the jabs of pain like little needles poking through his skin. His stomach twisted and curled with pinpricks. Round and round and round until he felt sick, nauseated. His jaws ached from the strain of holding back the taste of bile as it rose up to his throat and coated his tongue. Gabriel closed his eyes. Mother loves me, it's all right. Mother loves me. He had to say this in his mind or else Mother would know. He had to survive. Within his heart his father's presence stirred and spoke. I am with you and will appear in many ways, in many forms during your life, to instruct and guide. Listen and follow. Dust slapped Gabriel's cheeks like angry demons. There was a flash of light, no more than a wink. It happened again, brighter and strong. To his side, a man cloaked in light knelt next to him and touched his shoulder. I will come in many ways, in many forms, to instruct and guide. Gabriel had the sight, saw into the spirit world, his mother said. At home, when she noticed his gift, she was troubled. He could tell by her furrowed brow. Her friends who gathered with her in the family kitchen nodded, and when she spoke of it, they said he would be a dangerous boy to raise, strong-willed. He had to be broken early, they said, as they had done with their sons. Mother was head of the group called Las Mujeres de Dios, the Women of the Almighty. Mother Juana, as their leader, must set an example by disciplining her son. They spoke in Spanish because they thought Gabriel did not understand. Gabriel tucked off in his bedroom, his door slightly ajar, heard their mean words. He followed their Spanish. Mother Juana spoke and the women wailed their prayers in Spanish, and Gabriel understood. He saw her cruel smile. In his mind he saw his mother's nature because she had the mystic sight, the third eye between his brow point that his mother would touch and quickly draw away from, her hand trembling. Gabriel had the sight, and others besides Mother did not know that he saw into how things were. He should shake someone's hand, and an image would come. He would see an animal, bad or good, and it told him about the person. He had dreams, and what he dreamt would happen the next day. He sensed that something was good or bad, and smells would come, roses or incense, or skunks and sewage. He often saw the screeching face of his mother, a black coyote howling and drooling and foaming at the mouth. Gabriel closed off the sight of the black coyote and made it go far away. In his bedroom, Gabriel saw and sensed most powerfully. He loved his bedroom, his small adobe room of mysteries. He knew the word mysteries from his R.L. Stein and Goosebumps. Books helped him to trust what his mind and feelings whispered, A long wooden bookshelf held his books. He'd taught himself to read before going to preschool. And so his father gifted him with books, treasures that made him feel close to his father and quiet inside. The day after his father's death, he read his books with his bedroom door closed, the brown adobe walls sheltering him from the sadness of the outer world. As he read, his mind quickened. The white space between his eyes opened with a flash of light. Father, draped in a white glow, stood beside the bed. He smiled and told Gabrielle to read and to listen and feel. Then he disappeared. His mother wailed again. Nighttime darkness continued to descend and the wind stayed in its brutal course at Father's funeral. Mother Juana hadn't noticed the spirit of a man cloaked in light beside Gabriel. He wasn't Gabriel's father. He was more than a man. He was everything that Father was and more. Through the corner of his eyes, Gabriel saw the white-bearded old man. In many ways, in many forms, I will come. The words were close as heartbeats and breath. He knew if he turned and looked directly at him, the man would disappear. The light was intense, like rays of the sun. The old man had something to say. Suddenly, unclean sounds went into Gabriel's ears and chest, crackling and squealing voices rising from under the earth and into his body, trying to block out the lingering presence of the old man and his words. Like a god, the white-bearded man lifted his right hand, fingers spread. The noise went up from the ground into his palm, a mighty hand with powerful magic. Gabriel's mind had become silent as a windless autumn night, magic making him still inside, just like he was when in his bedroom reading alone. The old man was strong and made what was bad cease. Even as the underworld racket stopped, the graveyard winds kept up their awful screams. The quiet of the man in the moment wrapped strong and warm arms around Gabriel. Invisibility stood guard around the old man. Mother could not see him. No one could see him. He was there only for Gabriel. He bent down beside Gabriel and touched his shoulder. A crystal-clear calm made the shrieking wind and the crying women and the priest's strange prayers seem far, far away. Mother's red hair blew in the wind like it was on fire. It didn't scare Gabriel because of the old man, his warm and solid hands steady on Gabriel's shoulders. His kind eyes said that he was 10,000 times 10,000 years old. His mother's red hair and shrieking prayers no longer scared him. Then the old man spoke, and through Gabriel's mind sent a message. Listen, when the day goes away and the night comes, remember I am here. He touched Gabriel's heart. Listen. Gabriel's mother abruptly glanced down at him. He looked into her eyes and she knew she hadn't heard the old man, but she had a squint in her eyes. Her eyes glowed red, and the old man's hands did not move from Gabriel's shoulders. Big branches from the cottonwoods cast long moon shadows over the grave. Now they looked like skinny people scratching at each other, cloaking the old man. The wind picked up its screeching. Gabriel's hound pounded like stampeding horses. Mother squeezed his hand. His fingers tangled together, tips burning with pain. Then she looked away and wailed more loudly than ever. The old man continues, Tell no one about me. I will help you as a boy. I will help you as a man. Listen. The old man motioned again to Gabriel's heart and then touched between Gabriel's eyes, the brow point. The old man stopped and looked up. Gabriel caught his mother's gaze. She'd seen the old man, pointed at him and screeched like the evil winds. Blistering dust and grit blinded Gabriel. He pulled his hand away from his mother and rubbed his eyes, trying to clear them. But when he looked again, squinting, he saw that the light of the old man had vanished. His mother was wrapped in a cloud of dust. Out of the cloud came a coyote, foam curling from its mouth. It howled, and an instant later legions of dust devils took over the landscape and swallowed it in clouds of dust, trash and tumbleweeds. Mother reappeared beside him and picked him up. She screeched with a million hateful voices. His heart beat rapidly, fluttering like a flock of sparrows flying away. Catching his breath was hard. The night plays tricks, his mother seethed, her breath hot and rank. The wind suddenly ceased. Brown and grey clouds gave way to blackness that closed in and covered the full moon. Spirits of children rose out of their graves. They pointed at Gabriel and his mother. Their hands and fingers grew and reached to grab him, take him away under the earth. Mother swept her black shawl over Gabriel. She whispered, I will protect you, mijo. They escaped into the jet black night. I hope you enjoyed this chapter reading and that you'll go check out the book. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.